This is episode 112. How to tell if someone is trustworthy. So we are constantly having to decide on a person's trustworthiness, yet most of us are not aware of the criteria we're using. Some of it is good criteria and some not so good. So here are some guidelines, or 9 signs that someone is trustworthy. Hi, I'm Carla Rieger, and this is the MindStory Speaker Podcast. So trust is the bedrock of our relationships, and it's also a fragile thing. Whether it's a spouse, child, parent, sibling, neighbor, coworker, friend posting on social media, or even a journalist talking in the news, or leaders or politicians, we need to know how much of our trust to invest, and we need to be confident that our investment is safe. Times when it's especially important is when you're deciding on a life partner, a service provider, a business partner, a friend, or listening to advisors on, say, financial, health, legal, or property issues, like how to make decisions moving forward with your life. But many people don't have a method for assessing trustworthiness. They might not value, in fact, trustworthiness as much as other qualities like how the person presents themselves, their past successes, their title, who they know, how nicely they compliment you, and all that. But if you really think about it, you are constantly having to decide if someone or something is trustworthy. I mean, every day you're having to decide that. Like when you choose to read a social media post or listen to a video, is the provider of the information, like the journalist, the podcaster, or the author, a trustworthy source of advice for you? Is that babysitter trustworthy? Are those people renting your home trustworthy? Is that new brand of toothpaste trustworthy being used? Now, you probably have an unconscious barometer, but it does help to be as conscious as possible about what criteria you are using. To start with, here's some background on trust that you may or may not be aware of. First, trust is not usually black or white. It's on a sliding scale. We all go up and down on this sliding scale. Think of it like a dial. You go up and down on your trustworthiness. Other people go up and down on their trustworthiness. You go up and down on your ability to trust others. So you can turn it up as you develop trust with someone. And then other times you might turn it down if you see that same person showing signs of not being trustworthy. Similarly, if you lost trust with someone but they worked to regain your trust, you can dial it back up again. You can also think of it the other way around. We have all violated someone's trust at some point in time. I know I have. In fact, if you ever meet someone who said they've never done anything that violated someone's trust, they're probably untrustworthy because they're not being honest. We all make mistakes, especially when we're younger and don't realize the consequences. I've been grateful that certain people didn't write me off as an untrustworthy person forever, but gave me opportunities to regain their trust. And sometimes it has understandably taken time, and that's okay. So if people have done that for you, it helps sometimes to allow yourself to rebuild trust in others. That said, there are pathologically untrustworthy people in the world, and so it would be unwise to rebuild trust with those types and just avoid them. Okay, so secondly, sometimes you don't have enough background with someone to decide if they're trustworthy, so that's when you either have to find more information, depending on what it is, like maybe you go online or you talk to others who know them or see examples of their work, and or you go with your intuition or gut instincts, as I've talked about on episodes 108 and 111. So, the more developed you are in your research skills and intuition, you're combining them, the less likely you are to fall victim to an untrustworthy person. And thirdly, it helps to remember that trust is a two-way street. Sometimes when life gets overwhelming or we've been recently burned by someone or something, we start to dial down on our trust of everything. I'm sure you've experienced a time when you maybe withheld trust from someone who was actually trustworthy. You were so overly cautious, you missed out on a great relationship or a great opportunity. And especially these days with the constant confusing and contradictory advice in the media, social media, friends, family about all the changes happening in the world right now, many people are dialing down on their willingness to trust right now in a big way. So you do have to be in a relaxed state in order to properly assess if someone is trustworthy or not. So here's a compilation of best advice, or 9 signs that someone is trustworthy. So these are things you can be on the lookout for when it comes to trustworthiness. And as I said, the more you can be consciously on the lookout for those things and use these as criteria, the more accurate you'll be. So number 1 is they don't continually lie to themselves. Trustworthy people are willing to see the truth even if it's uncomfortable. So of course, we all have our blind spots and we don't always see ourselves with 100% accuracy, but untrustworthy people often don't tell themselves the truth about especially big issues or those hard truths like an addiction or a big personality flaw. They just don't want to see those things about themselves, so they really have to disconnect from reality, and they will do so even when people around them can plainly see what's going on and point it out. They work hard to create a perception of themselves that the people who know them well can see right through. For example, have you ever talked to someone who keeps saying to you, "Hey, just trust me"? If they have to keep saying it over and over again, that's maybe a sign you shouldn't. If they have to tell you how to feel without allowing that trust to develop naturally through actions, that's a big red flag. And if you're really paying attention, you can pick that up. So if you see someone trying to appear like someone they are not, trying to be trustworthy, or they're not admitting mistakes, flaws, or issues, especially to the people that matter, that is a sign of untrustworthiness. On the other hand, trustworthy people are more what you see is what you get. They know they need to earn your trust, and they will fess up to mistakes. So number 2 is trustworthy people tend to trust others. On the other hand, untrustworthy people tend to project negative motives onto others. For example, thieves are very paranoid about their stuff being taken. Liars often believe others are lying. And say cheaters commonly accuse their partners of cheating. In other words, if you meet someone who thinks that everyone else is untrustworthy, that's usually a sign they are untrustworthy. So number 3 is they are congruent. And by that I mean trustworthy people are consistent. They show self-control. They do what they say they're going to do. Although most people at some point say eat more than they wanted to, avoid exercising when they said they would, or betray a confidence, people who are generally untrustworthy do this continually. They continually cannot control their eating or some other addiction. They regularly don't keep a boundary that you have asked them to respect, or they might gossip regularly, for example. It's common that they say they will do something and then not do it. For example, they will show up late, and they may try to rush or drag things out or cancel plans at the last minute for their own benefit. In other words, you generally can't count on them. Sign number 4 of a trustworthy person is they care about the truth. So trustworthy people are the type of people who have displayed a discomfort if someone, say, asks them to lie when they know the motive is manipulative. They prefer to just be honest. By contrast, untrustworthy people have no problem lying for manipulative reasons and often have an agenda to make you think or feel a certain way. So they'll exaggerate things about other people, products, current events, or themselves so that you will think the way they want you to think. Trustworthy people, on the other hand, allow you to make your own mind up about things. They will focus on facts, verifiable facts, and encourage you to do your own research to find what works for you. And the 5th sign is they show compassion. So they honestly seem to be caring about others. And caring about others with healthy boundaries, of course, not overly enabling others or being a martyr. But compassion is a sign that someone is trustworthy. It's a sign that someone has good self-esteem. They are more connected to the true self. They care about themselves and therefore can care about others. And you can't really do one without the other. But on the other hand, an untrustworthy person might laugh at someone's misfortune or not care if their actions create harm for someone else, whereas a trustworthy person thinks through how their actions or even their thoughts will affect others. So the sixth one is they demonstrate humility. Now, some people think that you can't be confident and be humble, but actually true confidence comes from true humility, which I talk about on my episode on true confidence. It's a sign that a person doesn't consider themselves as more important or less important than anyone else. Trustworthy people understand their strengths and the value they bring, and they can talk about that with a kind of congruent confidence. In other words, they don't come across as bragging or arrogant or try to put themselves above others. In the same way, they don't idolize others or put themselves below others. They are respectful of others, but not at the detriment of their own well-being. And the seventh sign is that they seek power with versus power over. So trustworthy people don't try to impose their will on others because they don't feel the need to control those around them. They seek to empower others instead. Power with. Untrustworthy people, by contrast, often like to have power over others. And to do that, they might, say, act in disrespectful ways or bully or manipulate others to get their way. They tend to be the type of person who will cast themselves as a victim and blame others instead of taking responsibility. You can tell a trustworthy person because they seek to see their part in any issues, take responsibility where it's appropriate. They aren't just takers. They also understand the value of giving and taking in a way that shows gratitude and respect for the people they interact with. They value other people's contributions and they give credit where it's due, even if it means they don't get to shine as much. And the eighth one is they tend to be calm and centered, especially when you're talking about issues that involve trust. See, trustworthy people have an inner peace that trustworthy people don't have. Now, of course, we all get anxious, but an untrustworthy person, who also tends to be someone who has low self-esteem, is often trying to give a false impression of who they are, so they are more likely to display signs of anxiety, such as agitated body language, certain tone of voice, eyes darting around all over the place. Whereas trustworthy people generally seem more at ease because they have nothing to hide, because they are being open with you. You likely feel more calm and centered too in their presence, even if they're good at hiding the agitation. So you'll feel more calm if you're not subconsciously picking up on their subterfuge or mirroring back their negative cues. So the ninth and final sign is they are embodied. So what do I mean by that? Well, trustworthy people seem more grounded, more in their body, more here in the present moment. In contrast, untrustworthy people seem ungrounded, lost in their heads, spinning on the past, say, worried about the future, using their logical mind to make decisions alone instead of instincts, intuition as well. And you can tell groundedness by how someone stands, walks, talks. They're connected here and centered. So is the person connected here and centered, or are they seemingly disconnected somewhere else and uncentered? So those are the 9 signs, and you might be thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I know so many people that have signs of being untrustworthy. Or even you're noticing, I actually have signs of that too. If so, that's normal. We're all a work in progress. Very few of us grew up in an environment where we had trustworthiness mirrored or mentored to us in a healthy way. Maybe your parents didn't get that kind of training. Maybe your teachers weren't the best. And we do mostly learn trustworthiness as children when our minds are wide open. That said, some people are born with a kind of mature soul quality that is naturally inclined towards trustworthiness, while others are inclined maybe more naturally towards untrustworthiness. Maybe it's related to our ancestral DNA or something more esoteric than that, but I would also say that by default, a lot of it is learned. It's not nature, it's nurture. And so that's good news. That means if you do display any kind of untrustworthy behavior, and if you're human, you probably do, the good news is that you can unlearn it. The best way is to become a good observer of human nature in yourself and others. And when you meet someone who is truly trustworthy, has some or all of those signs, just seek to understand how you can become more that way. Often we learn our best behaviors by being around people who have those good qualities. You don't often even learn them consciously. It's just this mirroring effect where you pick it up by osmosis, which is great. So hanging around trustworthy people is a great way to learn, in other words. Now, you don't even need to know the person personally. They could be someone online that you learned from or a leader that you follow. Now, that said, of course, more and more news is coming out about people we thought were trustworthy who are not. Whether it's a celebrity, an authority figure, a politician, a spiritual guru, it's good to look and see if you did feel trusting towards them and then they turned out to be truly untrustworthy. Just look to see, okay, how was I duped? Just to study the situation with curiosity rather than judgment. Or anyone in your life, when you discover someone is untrustworthy, like in a really big way, someone that you trusted, look back and see if there were signs that you missed. Again, don't beat yourself up. We all fall victim to that kind of thing. But how can you learn to be better at discerning moving forward? And how can you learn to be more trustworthy yourself by watching the rise and fall of someone who played a false game in that respect? Another great way to learn to be more trustworthy and to discern trustworthiness in others is to look back on times in your life when you lost someone else's trust or when you lost trust in them. For example, when I was 18 years old, I wanted to work in a restaurant, but you had to be 19 years old, which was the legal drinking age. Like if you wanted to be a server, which I wanted to because they made the most money. So I found someone on my university campus who was creating fake IDs, like these driver's licenses that made you look older than you were. So I used that to apply for a job in the restaurant, and I got the job and started really enjoying working there. And I made lots of friends and got along well with my manager. And then it slipped out somehow that I actually was only 18 years old. I guess I told one of my friends and she told the manager. And my manager found out and she totally lost trust with me and started to assume that I'd probably lied about all kinds of other things. And so did many of the other people I worked with. And I was fired without notice. Understandably, they wanted to prevent legal hassles, but I also felt very ashamed and I lost this entire community of friends, plus my income at the time. So, I can look back on that and just feel shame again and beat myself up, which I did for a few years, or I can look back on it and say, okay, how could I have done it differently? Which I did with the help of a counselor a few years later. So, I could have been honest about my age and started out bussing tables or being a hostess, which didn't require legal drinking age. I could have found a job that takes 18-year-olds. I could have explored why did I need to lie to get a job? Like what was driving that? That kind of curious, compassionate inquiry is helpful rather than the judging, because if you judge, you tend to do it again. If you stop judging and get curious, you tend to learn and not do it again. So after that, indeed, I never lied about my age to get a job, because we often make these mistakes when we don't understand the consequences. And the real problem is if you don't learn from those mistakes. If you do, great. Another instance was when I was hired to speak at a conference. Now, normally I get a deposit up front to secure my time, But this company didn't want to offer that. Now, I had the instinct to decline the date at the time, but several of my friends were also speaking at that event, colleagues of mine, and it was local and I didn't need to travel, so I said yes. And I did a lot of preparation. And my presentation was very well received. It went really well, and I even stayed for the whole weekend because I knew a lot of the people, even the sound and setup people. I knew some of them. So it was really fun, and I really enjoyed myself. But in the end, none of us got paid. The organizer literally left the country with all the proceeds from the event and didn't pay anyone. So I learned a lot from that event because I knew so many people in the same position. So we talked about it a lot from many perspectives. And I saw that beating myself up, blaming others, shaming others wasn't going to lead to learning from the situation. And I noticed some people were doing that, and I noticed I was doing that. And at one point I just said, you know what, I'm going to stop that behavior. So I really thought through how the event organizer, who absconded with all the money, chose to organize the event, what he said, what he didn't say. I looked up the person's background, their track record. It was all quite obvious in retrospect that this was going to happen if I'd paid attention. So after that, I just never ended up in that position. If I sensed I might face that situation again, I just avoided going into business with that person. So it was a very good experience because I chose to learn from it. And I will say that one of the other people who didn't get paid seemed to continually attract those situations because I think he just didn't choose to learn from it the first time. So as I've said on many episodes, all these challenging situations we face in life, whether we are the perpetrator or the victim, just use them as opportunities to learn and then let go of the shame, blame, and trauma of it all and see that it is actually a rich learning ground to become a wiser, better, more trustworthy person yourself because of it. Now, if you continually attract untrustworthy people, then instead of labeling yourself as a victim or labeling yourself as a stupid person, just get compassionate with yourself and get curious. It might just be bad training when you were young, when you were unable to discern as well as you can now. And it might be because you just haven't chosen to truly learn from all those past situations. But it's never too late to choose to learn, to choose to see what you couldn't see before. Because your willingness to learn alone is huge. That choice to be willing actually opens a doorway in your mind. It actually starts writing a new train track of learning, even if you don't know what the learning is yet. It starts to form. You magnetize the learning to you if you are clear on the healthy, positive destination you want to end up in, which is that self-responsible, wise, discerning person who is trustworthy and who can discern trustworthiness in others. Now, at the same time, I want to caution you against labeling others as untrustworthy always and forever. Your consciousness bias about a person can actually bring out that behavior in them. So do have good boundaries, but also allow them to grow by not labeling them as always bad and untrustworthy. If you care about them, if the relationship is in your life anyways, tell them the outcomes, the actions, the behaviors you'd like to see, rather than scolding them for what they're doing wrong. Because if they have no positive direction to follow, they will default to old and comfortable behavior, because it's that combination of love and respect with boundaries and clear outcomes that you expect that can do wonders to retrain someone in trustworthiness, which is a huge gift, especially if they never got that training when they were young. So as I mentioned before, trustworthiness is a learned skill. It's like that old expression, good judgment comes from experience, which comes from a lot of bad judgment. All our experiences of being untrustworthy or experiencing someone else's untrustworthiness are rites of passage. We play out the drama triangle, villain, victim, savior over and over again until we learn to rise above it all, finding our neutrality, that inner peace is well earned because of our willingness to learn and grow from all those situations. So I hope that was helpful. For more ways of building discernment like this, do check out our book on Amazon, MindStory Inner Coach, How to Use Your Mind so you don't let it use you. There is a 5-part process you can learn called the AVARA model, and you can explore these situations of untrustworthiness and come out the other side with a lot more wisdom about it. So you can type that book, MindStory Inner Coach, into Amazon and you'll probably see it there. Or you can go to our website, mindstoryacademy.com, and you'll see it there. It's by me, Carla Rieger, and my partner, Dave O'Connor. Okay, that's it for today. In the meantime, please hit subscribe. Please like this episode and do share it so others can find it. Until next time, thanks for listening.